A loving husband. A devoted father. But one shocking discovery will turn his world upside down. What would you do if the person you trusted the most betrayed you? Jennifer hurriedly prepared to leave. Michael pulled his wife into a firm embrace for a rare morning goodbye. His hand slid down from Jennifer's back to her waist, but suddenly he felt something off. She wasn't wearing any underwear. This time, it didn't spark excitement in him. Michael lifted the hem of her skirt. "What's this, Jen? Why aren't you dressed properly?" he asked, his voice rising slightly. Jennifer pulled away from him. "You'll understand everything tonight," she said with a hint of urgency and rushed out the door. Michael stood there, stunned. Then he reached for his phone on the kitchen counter and tapped out a quick message. "Michael, she's left. Seems like a big plan for today. Brandon, my guy, will keep an eye on her." It had started 2 days ago. Michael, who was 46, had been working the night shift as a paramedic in Chicago when they were called to a minor traffic accident. After ensuring the victims were stable, they took a brief break. Michael headed to the men's room, and that's when it hit him, an unexpected, sharp pain. He let out a low groan, doubling over in agony. Brandon, another paramedic on his team, hearing the noise, rushed in. "Mike, what's wrong?" Michael was hunched over in pain. Brandon glanced at the urinal and grimaced at the sight of greenish discharge. "That looks bad," Brandon said, concerned. "You know what this could mean, right?" Michael nodded, still wincing. "Yeah, I get it. It's sensitive. I'll handle it. Thanks for checking on me." Michael made his way back to the office, trying to focus on finishing his shift. By morning, as his team wrapped up, he headed to Mercy General Hospital, a smaller, less public clinic outside his usual workplace, to ensure privacy. The waiting room was thankfully empty, and the staff brought him back for tests quickly. An hour later, Michael sat anxiously in the exam room. A nurse entered with an expression of mild disgust as she took his vitals. "The doctor will be in shortly," she said curtly before leaving. A few moments later, an older man in a white coat stepped into the room. "Mr. Adams." "I'm Dr. Keller," he introduced himself, sitting down across from Michael. "I've reviewed your tests, and I'm afraid I have some bad news. You've contracted a severe case of a sexually transmitted infection." Michael stared blankly at him. "Is it chlamydia or gonorrhea?" he asked, his voice calm despite the panic swirling inside him. "It's chlamydia," Dr. Keller replied. "I'm going to prescribe you some antibiotics, but you'll need to avoid any sexual contact for at least a week after completing treatment. If the symptoms don't clear up, you'll need to follow up with your regular physician." He paused, looking at Michael sympathetically. "I hate to ask, but for contact tracing purposes, I need to know, have you had any other partners recently?" "Just one," Michael said quietly. "My wife." The doctor's expression softened a bit. "I see. Well, she'll need to be tested and treated as well, even if she's not showing symptoms. Untreated chlamydia can cause serious complications. I'm required to report your case to the health department." Michael's mind raced as he left the hospital. Jennifer had given him an STD. Michael called his parents as he drove home. His father answered cheerfully, not sensing anything was wrong. "Hey there, Mike. Shouldn't you be at work?" "Dad, I've got a problem. Can I come over?" Michael's voice cracked slightly. "Of course. Your mom's making coffee. We'll see you soon." Michael, now 46 years old, and his younger sister, Megan, had grown up in a conservative, religious household in Chicago. Their parents had instilled strong values, including waiting until marriage for intimacy. Michael had taken those teachings seriously and remained a virgin until his wedding night with Jennifer, who had been patient with him despite his lack of experience. Over time, their physical connection had become comfortable, though not particularly exciting. But it had been enough, or so he thought. A year into their marriage, their first child, Sophia, was born. Then came Olivia, 14 months later. After Olivia's birth, Jennifer had her tubes tied, and they had settled into life as a family of 4. Michael pulled into his parents' driveway, his stomach in knots, preparing for the difficult conversation ahead. His father met him at the door, giving him a firm hug. "Come on in, son," he said gently. "Your mom's got coffee ready." In the kitchen, his mother gave him a warm embrace before they sat around the dining table. After saying grace, his father fixed him with a concerned look. "What's troubling you, Mike?" Michael sighed deeply, gathering his thoughts. "I just came from the doctor. I have chlamydia." His mother gasped, and his father's face grew serious. "Were you unfaithful to Jennifer?" "No, Dad." "Never," Michael said firmly. His father nodded slowly, taking his son at his word. "I believe you." "So, what now?" Michael shrugged helplessly. "I think I'm going to have to get a divorce. I don't see any other option." His mother looked heartbroken, immediately worrying about Sophia and Olivia. Michael assured her that the girls would eventually understand, though it would take time. His father leaned back in thought. "Well," he said thoughtfully, "adultery is certainly grounds for divorce, according to Scripture. Let me call Nancy Blake, the family law attorney from our church. She helped our friend Tom when he discovered his wife was having an affair. She'll be able to give you the advice you need. You're not alone in this, Mike. Be strong." Michael was deeply grateful for his parents' support. Within minutes, his father had set up a meeting with Nancy for that afternoon. "Bring your financial records and tax returns for the past few years," his father advised. "Nancy will need to review those." "Thanks, Dad. I'll head home and start gathering everything." Before leaving, his mother hugged him tightly. "We're here for you, sweetheart. Remember that. This will all work out." At home, Michael rummaged through their files, pulling out everything Nancy might need. It was then he realized that around 8 years ago, Jennifer had insisted on filing separate tax returns. Back then, he hadn't thought much of it. But now, as he looked through the papers, things didn't add up. There were bonuses and commissions that he had never heard about. Further investigation led him to something worse, a hidden bank account with nearly $4 million stashed away. Michael's phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer, "Working late tonight. Don't wait up." Michael's jaw tightened as he texted back a brief, "Okay." Jennifer worked as a financial advisor, attending frequent late dinners with clients and company parties. At first, Michael had accepted these late nights as part of her job. But now, everything felt suspicious. With the paperwork gathered, he headed to Nancy's office. The receptionist, a young brunette, greeted him kindly. "I have a 3 o'clock appointment with Nancy Blake," Michael said, trying to keep his composure. She smiled and led him to Nancy's office. Nancy, a sharp-eyed, no-nonsense attorney, stood up to greet him with a handshake. "Michael, I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances," she said. "Can I get you some coffee?" "That would be great, thanks." Nancy turned to her assistant. "2 coffees, please, Lisa. And those caramel creamers if we have any left." "So, Michael," Nancy said, turning her attention back to him, "I've heard a bit from your father, but I want to hear everything directly from you. What's going on?" Michael sighed, recounting everything from the doctor's visit that morning to his discovery of Jennifer's secret bank account. Nancy listened intently, taking notes as he spoke. When he finished, she leaned forward. "Let me explain how divorce works in Illinois." Nancy leaned in, her gaze steady. "Here's the reality, divorce in Illinois isn't about justice, it's about money. How much you have, how much her lawyer can take from you. Even with proof of infidelity, the court's focus will still be on dividing assets." Michael frowned. "What about the STD?" Nancy shook her head. That won't hold as much weight as you'd think. Her lawyer could argue that you contracted it from someone else. Everything depends on what a judge believes. And the hidden bank account? Michael asked. Nancy pursed her lips. That could be tricky. Jennifer might claim it was meant to be a surprise for your retirement or something like that. Honestly, it looks more like an exit strategy to me, but proving that will be difficult. Michael slumped in his chair. So, I'm stuck. Not necessarily, Nancy said, her voice firm. I work with an excellent private investigator. We can have surveillance on her as early as tonight. If she's still seeing anyone, we'll get concrete evidence. It's not cheap, but it will give us court-admissible proof. Want to move forward with that? Michael took a deep breath. Yeah, let's do it. Great, Nancy said, jotting down notes. I'll need details about Jennifer's car, make, model, license plate. Any idea where she might be right now? Michael pulled out his phone. She lost her phone last year, and I installed a tracker app when we got her a new one. Let me see if it's still active. After a moment, he looked up. Got her. Looks like she's at a house in the northern suburbs. Perfect, Nancy said, taking the address. She quickly called her investigator and sent him the necessary information. We'll know soon if anything's going on. Nancy then shifted her focus to the logistics. Now, you have 2 teenage daughters, right? Sophia and Olivia. Yes, Sophia is 15, and Olivia just turned 14. Do you want to pursue full custody? Absolutely, Michael replied without hesitation. Nancy nodded. That's going to be challenging. Courts usually favor the mother, especially if there's no history of abuse or neglect. But if Jennifer has been absent or inattentive, we might have a case. Who's been the primary caregiver? Me, Michael said firmly. Jennifer's hardly ever home in the evenings. She's either out late with clients or working long hours. I'm the one making dinner, helping with homework, getting them to school. That's good for your case, Nancy said, making a note. Are you certain the girls are biologically yours? Michael bristled slightly. Pretty sure. Does that matter? I've been their father their whole lives. It might, Nancy said gently. Knowing for sure could give us leverage. Here's a lab that does quick, discrete DNA testing if you want to be absolutely sure. She handed him a business card. Michael hesitated but took the card. Okay, I'll consider it. Nancy continued. What about your home? Is it in your name or jointly owned? It's in a family trust. No mortgage, Michael replied. Good, that simplifies things a lot. We'll still need to divide other assets, 50/50ths. I'll give you a checklist of what we need to account for. Michael nodded, feeling the weight of everything sinking in. Is there anything else I should be doing right now? Just start working on that asset checklist and keep a low profile for now, Nancy advised. Don't confront her yet. We'll wait to see what the investigator finds. As for the STD, it wouldn't hurt to ask her to get tested. It could protect you legally if you inform her. She handed Michael a list of documents to gather and a lab card for the DNA test. That's all for now. Once the investigator has something, we'll be in touch. Michael thanked Nancy and left, stopping by the lab on his way home to pick up the DNA test kit. Afterward, he swung by the bank to confirm the details of Jennifer's secret account. Back at home, he sat at the kitchen table, staring into his coffee. Most men would be drowning their sorrows in alcohol right now, but Michael had never touched the stuff. It was a family rule he had always respected. He thought back to that morning, holding Jennifer in his arms, unaware of her betrayal. You'll understand everything tonight, she had said before leaving. Michael messaged Nancy, letting her know that he suspected Jennifer might make her move tonight. Later that afternoon, the front door flew open, and Sophia and Olivia came bounding in from school. Dad! You're home. Sophia gave him a hug, noticing his troubled expression. What's wrong? I need you girls to pack some overnight bags. You're going to stay with Grandma and Grandpa for a couple of days, Michael said. Why? Did you and Mom have a fight? Olivia asked, concerned. Not exactly, Michael said, struggling to find the right words. There's something wrong, but we haven't fought about it yet. That might come later. Sophia's eyes widened. You caught her cheating, didn't you? Michael stared at Sophia, surprised by her intuition. What makes you think that? Sophia looked down, guilt evident in her eyes. I've overheard some of Mom's phone calls recently. She giggles like a teenager, and it just seemed weird. Michael pulled her into a hug. It's okay, sweetheart. You don't have to feel bad about not telling me sooner. But remember, you can always come to me about anything. He then looked over at Olivia, who stood nearby, quiet but clearly processing everything. Both of you, no matter what happens, we'll get through this together. Michael handed them the DNA test kit. Before you go, I need to swab your cheeks. It's just a precaution for the case. Olivia looked at him with wide eyes. You don't think we're really yours? Michael knelt down to meet her gaze. Of course you're mine. I've raised you both since the day you were born. But the lawyer suggested we be 100% certain, for legal reasons. This is just part of that. Sophia nodded, understanding the situation, though there was a sadness in her eyes. Are you really going to divorce Mom? Michael hesitated but finally said, I don't see another way. What she's done, it's hard to forgive. Olivia, her voice small, asked, isn't there any chance you could forgive her? Michael's jaw tightened. I don't think so, honey. She's left me no choice. After collecting the DNA samples from the girls and himself, Michael sent them upstairs to pack for their stay at their grandparents' house. Don't forget to grab your homework, he reminded them as they went up the stairs. Once at his parents' home, Michael hugged the girls goodbye and promised to call them later. As he sat down for a quiet dinner with his parents, his phone buzzed. It was Nancy. We've got some initial information from the PI, she said. Your wife has been busy, she's met with 3 different men today. Jesus, Michael muttered, his stomach churning. What kind of evidence do we have? I'm sending everything to your email now, Nancy replied. It's more than enough for the divorce proceedings. You'll have solid proof. Michael hung up and quickly checked his email. His heart sank as he opened the files, starting with an audio recording. The first thing he heard was a man's voice, so, you're married? Followed by the sound of rings clinking against a glass. Jennifer's laugh echoed through the speakers. For now, she said, her voice light. There was a pause, and the man spoke again. You're wearing a ring too. My husband doesn't know anything, Jennifer replied, her tone casual and dismissive. Michael's hands tightened around his phone. He listened as the man's voice came again, asking, so, what's the deal? Trouble in paradise? Jennifer responded with a smug tone that made Michael's blood boil. Oh, he'll be fine. I taught him everything he knows. Believe it or not, he was a 23-year-old virgin when we got married. Can you imagine? A total church boy. The man laughed, and Jennifer's next words stung like a fresh wound. He's a real straight arrow. Doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, doesn't even curse. But God, is he boring. Michael stopped the recording, unable to listen anymore. The betrayal felt like a physical blow, worse than any injury he'd ever suffered. 15 years of marriage, gone in an instant. His phone buzzed again, it was Jennifer. He answered, keeping his tone neutral. Michael? Are you okay? You sound a little off. Rough day, he replied. I'm wrapping up work. I've got another big client. I'll be home in about an hour. Anne. I'm still not wearing any underwear, she added, her voice teasing. Sure, Michael said flatly, not engaging with her flirtation. Love you, she chirped before hanging up. Michael sat there for a moment, realizing that he didn't care that he hadn't said, I love you, back. His feelings had been numbed by the overwhelming weight of her betrayal. He printed out the most damning evidence, the photos, text messages, and audio transcripts, and laid them out on the kitchen table, readying himself for the inevitable confrontation. As time passed, his anticipation grew, but Jennifer still didn't show up. After 2 hours, concern gnawed at him. Despite everything, a part of him still worried. He called her phone, it went straight to voicemail. He sent a text. No reply. 4 hours later, the house phone rang. Michael answered, dreading what was coming. Mr. Adams, this is Angela Roberts calling from Mercy General Hospital. Your wife has been in an accident. Can you come down here immediately? Michael's heart raced. Is she okay? What happened? I'm sorry, I can't disclose any details over the phone, Angela replied. Her doctor will speak with you when you arrive. Please ask for the courtesy desk when you get here. Michael quickly grabbed the envelope with the incriminating evidence and rushed out the door, his heart pounding. He drove to Mercy General Hospital, where he found the courtesy desk and gave Jennifer's name to the receptionist. She checked her computer and then signaled to a colleague. Could you please escort Mr. Adams to the ICU upstairs? A police officer approached Michael in the elevator. Mr. Adams. I'm Officer Henderson. I responded to your wife's accident. What happened? Michael asked, his voice tense. A motorcyclist, who was weaving between cars, hit her as she crossed the street. The driver was under the influence of drugs. I'm sorry, Henderson said, handing Michael his card. If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. Michael barely had time to process that information when the doctor appeared. Michael Adams. I'm Dr. Blake. How's my wife? Michael asked, his concern genuine despite everything. Jennifer has sustained multiple fractures, internal injuries, and severe head trauma. We've placed her in a medically induced coma to reduce brain swelling, Dr. Blake said gently before pausing. There's something else you should know. Your wife also tested positive for chlamydia. I already know, Michael replied, his voice hollow. I found out this morning. Have you been tested as well? Dr. Blake asked. Michael nodded. Yes, I'm being treated. Dr. Blake sighed. That's good. But there's more. We suspect that Jennifer may also be HIV positive. We're running tests now, and you should see your doctor for testing as soon as possible. If it turns out you're positive, medication and safe practices can allow you to live a relatively normal life. Michael stood there, numb. How long will she be here? He asked, trying to focus on something he could control. It's difficult to say right now. It could be weeks, possibly longer. Dr. Blake led Michael to Jennifer's room. The sight of her lying there, bruised and bandaged, was almost too much to bear. She was unrecognizable, with one leg in a cast and her face swollen and discolored. Despite his anger, the sight of her in such a fragile state stirred a twinge of sadness. He whispered a quiet prayer, then slowly removed his wedding ring. He placed it in the envelope with the evidence, writing Jennifer's name on the front. Nurse, he called softly, his voice strained. Can you make sure she gets this when she wakes up? Of course, the nurse replied. Just leave it on the tray next to her bed. Michael lingered for a moment, taking one last look at the woman who had broken his heart. Despite everything, seeing her like this still hurt. He carefully removed Jennifer's rings from her finger and pocketed them. Goodbye, Jennifer, he whispered, his voice barely audible. At home, the exhaustion hit him hard. He collapsed into bed, though sleep didn't come easily. Over the next few weeks, Michael made arrangements. He found a 2-bedroom ground-floor apartment with a garage for Jennifer, using her share of their joint accounts to pay the deposit and the first 2 months' rent. He quietly moved her belongings to the new place while she remained in the hospital. 2 weeks after the accident, Michael received a call from his doctor confirming that he was HIV negative. The physical toll of the ordeal was starting to fade, but the emotional wounds were still raw. 3 weeks later, Jennifer finally woke from her coma. Michael explained to the girls that he was heading to the hospital and dropped them off at his parents' house before making his way to see Jennifer. As he neared her room, he saw Dr. Blake at the nurse's station, along with a man in a brown jacket holding a manila envelope, the process server. "How is she?" Michael asked. "Jennifer is conscious, and her vitals are stable," Dr. Blake replied. "The antibiotics have cleared the infection, but we're monitoring her closely for any complications." Michael entered Jennifer's room, the process server following behind him discreetly. Jennifer looked up weakly, her eyes immediately finding the envelope on her bedside table, the one Michael had left for her. "Michael," she said, her voice hoarse. "Jennifer," Michael responded, his tone cool and distant. "You found out, didn't you?" Jennifer asked, nodding toward the envelope. "Yes," Michael said. "I know everything, about the affair, the money, the STD." Her face crumpled, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Michael didn't flinch. "I have photos, texts, videos, more than enough proof of your infidelity." The process server stepped forward. "Are you Jennifer Adams?" he asked formally. "Yes," Jennifer replied, her voice barely audible. He handed her the manila envelope, took a quick photo with his phone, and said, "You've been served," before turning and leaving the room. Jennifer's face crumpled further, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You couldn't even wait until I was out of the hospital." "No," Michael said firmly, his voice steady. "You wanted to run away from everything. I just moved up your timeline." "Do the girls know?" Jennifer asked, her voice trembling. "Yes, they know. And right now, they don't want to see you." "That's why they're with my parents," Michael said, his tone cold but calm. "I'm seeking full custody, with liberal visitation if they want to see you, but I'm not sure they will anytime soon. They're angry and hurt, Jennifer. I don't blame them." Jennifer looked down at her hands, her voice barely a whisper. "And I guess you hate me too." Michael paused for a moment, the weight of everything pressing down on him. "I don't hate you, Jennifer. I feel sorry for you. You destroyed our marriage, and you hurt the girls. But no, I don't hate you." Jennifer wiped her tears and shifted uncomfortably in her hospital bed. "How long am I going to be here?" she asked, changing the subject. "The doctor said they want to keep you for at least another week," Michael replied. "After that, I've arranged for you to stay at an apartment I rented for you. Your things have been moved, and the utilities are in your name. Everything's taken care of." Jennifer nodded, her face a mix of exhaustion and regret. "I see." Michael handed her an envelope. "This is your half of our joint accounts, minus the deposit and first 2 months' rent for the apartment." Her hands shook slightly as she took the envelope. "And what about the hidden account?" she asked cautiously. "I know about it," Michael said, his voice hardening. "My lawyer has frozen the funds. Sign the divorce papers, and you'll get your half. Otherwise, we'll take this to court, and all of the evidence I have will be made public." Jennifer's eyes widened. "I'll fight you for it," she said weakly, trying to muster some defiance. Michael's expression didn't change. "That would be a mistake, Jennifer. If you fight, I'll make sure every detail of your affairs and that hidden account is out in the open. It's your choice." Her face paled as the reality of the situation hit her. I'll think about it." "Have your lawyer review the papers," Michael said. "Sign them, and we can end this quickly." Jennifer looked down, her voice breaking again. "I'm so sorry, Michael. I never wanted this to happen." "I don't believe you," Michael replied, his voice steady. "This isn't something that just happened. You made choices. Now, you'll have to live with them." As he turned to leave, Jennifer called out one last time. Can I call the girls?" Michael stopped at the door and turned slightly. "You can try, but I don't know if they'll answer. Right now, they don't want anything to do with you." Jennifer's voice was barely audible as she said, "I understand." Without another word, Michael left the hospital. As he passed by some of the nurses, he noticed the disapproving looks they gave him, but he didn't care. Their opinions didn't matter. He was doing what was necessary for himself and his daughters. Epilogue. The divorce was finalized swiftly. Michael tested negative for HIV, escaping the worst-case scenario. Jennifer was negative as well. Nancy handed Michael a check for $2 million, half of Jennifer's secret account. Michael set aside the money for college funds for Sophia and Olivia. Life moved on. It took almost a year before the girls would speak to Jennifer again, and even longer before they were comfortable spending time with her. In the end, Michael found solace in knowing that despite the emotional scars, he had come out stronger for his daughter's sake.